Continuing here in our news, the top military leadership in Brazil sees the failure in Lula's plane as a reflection of budget cuts. According to these military officials, the successive cuts make it difficult to modernize equipment and even compromise the maintenance of defense equipment.
The presidential plane suffered another malfunction, being the fourth failure in a short period of time. And this time, the Brazilian president himself admitted that he was afraid the aircraft might catch fire. The incident, which happened now at the beginning of October, exposed a much deeper problem than just a simple mechanical failure. The malfunction actually exposed the collapse of the Brazilian armed forces. The malfunction was just the most visible symptom of a system that is gradually disintegrating and that threatens national security. Welcome to life in the barracks.
I don't want the armed forces, in the slum fighting with criminals. That's not the role of the armed forces. And as long as I'm president, there won't be any GLI.
The president's statement on arrival in Belém do Pará was direct. Quote, "There was a problem with the plane's engine, an expensive FAB plane. We had to land, afraid it might catch fire." End quote. The statement raised an alert not only among the military, but also among political analysts. For the leadership of the Brazilian Air Force, as told to cable news network Brazil, the cause is clear. The successive budget cuts have destroyed the institution's operational capacity. The Brazilian Air Force now has just over 300 aircraft, down from more than 500 a decade ago. The 41% cut in fleet maintenance and modernization funding triggered a domino effect. Fewer planes, missions, and training. The number of flight hours was cut in half, and runways that were once strategic, like the one at Recife Air Base, were simply deactivated. These numbers reflect more than just administrative neglect. They show an erosion of national sovereignty. If military aviation stops, the country loses its eyes, ears, and arms in the sky. And meanwhile, resources are wasted on projects and expenses that have nothing to do with Brazil's defense. Columnist Ricardo Noblat from Portal Metropolis summed up the general feeling precisely by saying that the president seems to be playing with his own life or considers himself immortal. The sentence, though provocative, highlights the gap between political discourse and barracks reality. Excellence and preparedness are demanded from the armed forces, but the bare minimum necessary for them to function in favor of the nation is denied. Since this government began, the president has faced several aerial scares. In January 2024, a malfunction in the plane carrying his security team forced the cancellation of a trip to Paraíba. A month later, the presidential Airbus A319 jet had to abort takeoff at Congonhas due to technical problems.
The presidential plane that made an emergency landing in Mexico City will likely be replaced by a newer model. President Lula was on the flight and has already returned to Brasilia.
In October of the same year, another incident exposed the seriousness of the situation. On the way back to Brazil, an engine failed, requiring an emergency landing in Mexico City. The plane had to circle the airport for more than 4 hours to burn off fuel before landing. The president, irritated, even argued with the pilots as if the problem was theirs and not the result of years of institutional neglect. In March 2025, the presidential plane aborted its Sorocaba landing again due to a technical failure. There were 4 malfunctions in a little over a year. Each one made it clearer the collapse is not just technical, but also moral and strategic. The Brazilian armed forces are in a silent state of alert. Officers report a fuel shortage for armored vehicles, ships, and fighter jets. Without resources, maintenance is postponed, training is cut, and crews lose proficiency. In many barracks, the feeling is one of abandonment. The neglect of the military didn't start now, but it has never been this deep. For decades, the country has treated its armed forces as a burden, not as an essential pillar of sovereignty. Unlike before, the current government has accelerated degradation to the point of threatening internal security. Disregarding the armed forces is like surrendering sovereignty. They are more than combat units. They protect territory, order, and stability. When political power weakens them, it also weakens the state and exposes the country to internal and external risks. The problem isn't a lack of money, it's a lack of priority. While the FAB struggles to keep planes in the air, the government spent 374,000 reais on 12 carpets for the official palaces. Each of these 2 carpets cost 113,000 reais. This clearly shows a country that values office luxury over national security. These decisions show the abyss between Brazil's needs and the vision of those who govern it. The country needs fuel for armored vehicles, not carpets in halls. It needs working radars, not palace decorations. The gap between leaders and military reality turns breakdowns into warnings and warnings into tragedies. As the Brazilian government covers up the situation with speeches, the armed forces structure worsens daily. Air Force officers privately admit many missions have been canceled due to lack of parts or maintenance. It's the kind of weakness that an adversary country would never let go unnoticed. Without a serious restructuring, Brazil risks losing its ability to respond in critical situations, whether natural disasters or external threats. The Brazilian Air Force's warning is a plea that extends beyond aviation. It's a plea to preserve national sovereignty. The truth is that while the presidential plane suffers malfunctions, the country as a whole continues in free fall. Politics, the economy, and the armed forces are in synchronized collapse. With each cut, with each waste, Brazil loses a little more of its autonomy and its strength. The air traffic failures perfectly reflect a government that has lost its way. If the head of state's plane isn't safe to fly, what can we say about the aircraft that defend our borders or transport lives on humanitarian missions? On Life in the Barracks, you stay updated on all things military. Like, subscribe, and watch one of the videos on your screen. Forward, combatants, until next time.